Tonight's presentation would, I feel certain, have been of special interest to him as he had researched, written about, and promoted wider knowledge of the events that occurred in Prince Edward in the 1950s and 60s. Ron was an early and outspoken supporter of the creation of the Bowdoin Museum, and he remained involved in its development into the amazing museum and the community treasure that it is today. On many occasions, after helping organize an event or program, I would get a phone call or email from Ron the next day saying, "Good work." If you got a compliment from Ron, you could be sure that you had earned it. And we feel there's no better way to honor him than to provide our students and community with programming that will inform, educate, and inspire. I want to especially thank Ron's wife, Sandy Heinemann. There's Sandy. Thank you for being here tonight, for joining us. And I'd also like to acknowledge the support of the Department of History, the Office of Culture and Inclusion, and the 250th Anniversary Planning Committee in organizing this event. As part of our anniversary programming, we want to highlight important moments in the college's history, of which this period is certainly one. And now I'd like to turn to an introduction of our speakers tonight. Dr. Patricia Sullivan, who is the William A. Fairey II Professor of History at the University of South Carolina. And she's the first person that I thought of when we began planning how to commemorate Robert Kennedy's visit to Hampden-Sydney and to reflect on the significance of his visit. Dr. Sullivan has a recent book entitled Justice Rising, Robert Kennedy's America in Black and White, which will be available for purchase and for signing after the talk. Dr. Sullivan is also the author of Lift Every Voice and Sing, the NAACP in the Making of the Civil Rights Movement, Days of Hope, Race and Democracy in the New Deal Era, and multiple other books. And for more than 20 years, she, along with Waldo Martin, ran a legendary NEH Summer Institute at Harvard on teaching the Civil Rights Movement. As a young faculty member at Hampden-Sydney, it was my very good fortune to be selected to participate in the Summer Institute, which included so many luminaries who participated in and wrote about the Civil Rights Movement. That experience had a profound impact on me. It has continued to have an impact on me more than 20 years later, and I remain grateful to her for the opportunity, and for the opportunity to have been her friend and to have benefited from her considerable knowledge over the last 20 plus years. I'm still a little surprised that I got chosen, but I'm very grateful for that. And we have another alumnus of that. Where's Lara? So Lara Smith from Longwood is another alumnus of that program. Before I turn the podium over to her, I want to direct your attention to a portrait of John F. Kennedy, which was painted by Hampden-Sydney alumnus Louis Briel, who went on to become a noted painter whose work hangs in the National Gallery of Art. He presented this very portrait to Robert Kennedy during his visit. You can see the photograph on the poster for this event if you all have seen that poster. And I hope you'll take a moment to view this painting, which, after a rather long and winding and somewhat mysterious road, has now found its way back to the college, where we were delighted to receive it. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you all for turning out tonight. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be delivering the Ronald L. Heinemann Lecture in the History of the American South. Ron Heinemann was, I think, the leading political historian of mid-20th century Virginia. His work had a tremendous influence on me, and what I've learned since I've been here and in reading about him, his achievements as a historian, which were legendary, are matched by his achievements as a teacher and a citizen of Hampden-Sydney. So I'm honored to be giving this lecture, and I'm so delighted to meet Sandy Heinemann tonight. I want to thank my dear friend Caroline and the History Department and the 250th Anniversary Committee for inviting me to deliver this lecture and for organizing an amazing series of events. And I also want to say, Caroline, knowing you for the last 24 years has been just a joy, and she's my fellow explorer of the NAACP and many other important things. But the events are terrific, and the one this afternoon, and I'm sure many of you were here, was just such an inspiration to me in thinking about this place in the 1960s. Ed Ayers and Lund and Reverend Edward Berryman just filled the room with their wisdom and remembrances and really put us back in that place. I want to thank President Larry Stenberg for the warm welcome this evening. And I also want to give a shout out to Lara Smith, and my dear friend for many years, who is the moving force behind the Milton Museum, which, as a civil rights historian, I've been to a lot of museums. I think that is one of the best, because it roots itself in the local story and then looks out to the history of the state and the nation. It really helps us understand what's important about what happened here. And so, yes. Okay. It's great to be back in Virginia. I began my academic career here at the University of Virginia's Carter G. Woodson Institute for African American and African History, and had the opportunity to work with and meet some of the civil rights pioneers that came to the state: Palmer Weber, Oliver Hill, and Lucius Edwards, to mention a few. My discovery of something Robert Kennedy did while he was a student at UVA was one of the things that piqued my interest in him. As a civil rights historian, I couldn't do top-down history. I heard about the Kennedys not much. I just went and interviewed people in local communities. But that incident and a few other things led me to take a fresh look at the civil rights and racial struggles of the 1960s through Robert Kennedy's public life. And it was a true education for me. While a law student at UVA in 1951, he confronted the reality of legally mandated segregation and challenged it. By the time he came to Prince Edward County 13 years later, the civil rights movement had transformed America and Robert Kennedy as well. 1964 was a transitional year, as we learned earlier today, for him, for Prince Edward County, and for the country. Meeting with students at the 4 schools sponsored by the Prince Edward Free School Association, Kennedy was seeing the fruits of what he and his brother, President Kennedy, had done to help provide schooling for Black children who had been denied schooling for 4 years. At Hampden-Sydney College, when he came to speak here later that afternoon, he was looking toward the future and engaging the people who would be shaping it. So this evening, I'd like to briefly sketch Robert Kennedy's journey from his student experience at the University of Virginia Law School to his visit here 60 years ago in a way that will help us better appreciate that moment and what it might mean today. Now, Robert Kennedy barely got into the University of Virginia Law School. It's not for the fact that he had a wealthy and politically connected father. He probably wouldn't. He was a C student at Harvard. He majored in government, but football was his passion. Even though of slight build at 5'10" and 155 pounds, he achieved the major goal of his undergraduate career. He made the varsity team. He's number 86 up there. And Charles Pierce is also in this picture. Charles Pierce, he was 70. Harvard played a historic game at UVA in October of 1947. Normally, teams from outside the South were coming south. And they had an African-American player, he could just not be there. He said, no, Charles Pierce is coming to Charlottesville. And unfortunately, Robert Kennedy broke his leg in practice, so we did not come to the VA at that point. But that was a historic event when Pierce played football in Charlottesville, first African-American to play VA. So he was accepted at UVA with the warning that if his academic performance did not improve, he'd be out. He worked hard and graduated in the solid middle of his class. More of a captain, one of his professors remarked, he never volunteered in class, but did reasonably well to call them. So he was that historic people. But an incident during his law school year stands out. As head of the Student Legal Forum, he invited Ralph Bunche, the noted African-American scholar and diplomat, to deliver their spring lecture in 1951. Bunche had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize the previous summer, first African-American to win the Nobel Peace Prize, for successfully negotiating the 1948 armistice between Jews and Arab states. Kennedy, who had traveled to the Middle East after he graduated from Harvard in 1948, arrived in the Middle East in the midst of the Arab-Israeli War. So this is something the conflict area deep interest in, and what they had to say today. And as Ralph Bunche, the pioneer toward first peace settlement. So Bunche accepted under one condition, that the audience not be segregated. When Kennedy told Dean Dibble, the dean informed him that Virginia law required that in any public assemblage attended by both whites and blacks, quote, the white race and the colored race shall be separated. This was a sensitive issue for a publicly funded university and a state that would be the center of massive resistance. But Ribble recognized the opportunity of hosting a figure of national and even international significance. So he told Bobby Kennedy he would support the idea if he get the Student Advisory Panel, Council to agree, and the Board of Visitors to sign a house. So he can't read up to him. And he met with representatives of all the Wall Street classes, said, here's this resolution. They all agreed with it, but the many would not sign it because they were planning to go back to Alabama or somewhere else in the South and have a political career, and they didn't want it to be associated with their name. He'd do his job. He wouldn't get back. He believed in it, and he signed. Well, he got enough together to put this resolution together, put it in a letter to President Colby Darnell. It's a fascinating letter, and he explains all the reasons why UVA should welcome Ralph West to a non-segregated audience. Citing the experience of World War II, the role of African American soldiers, recent Supreme Court decision, he said it started to chip away at segregation in higher ed, and even the global, America represents itself as a big democracy, and he had Ralph West on this speech. Darden was persuaded, and he said, okay, one time we'll do it. And he also mentioned in the letter there that he ex-deal with the dean and Kennedy in the middle and that, only this was a public lecture that the law school students by Republican. He said, 150 to 200 can come to this lecture. So the night of the lecture, there are 1,500 people. I have a list happening. 1/3 of them was African American. Imagine Ralph Fudge looking at him into that. And he introduced Blanche Kennedy by saying, this is the man who could say, I brought peace to Palestine. So Blanche's topic was the United States and prospects for peace. But at the end of the speech, he turns his attention to the United States. And he said, to win the battle for democracy abroad, there must be a convincing demonstration of democracy at home. Americans cannot expect the people of Africa and Asia to embrace democracy if it was qualified by color. He expressed confidence that the American people would solve these problems, but he anticipated a steep climb. He closed by, quote, urging strength of determination so deep that it will be capable of raising an abnormal effort to correct this aberration. Well, such an effort would be demonstrated less than a month later, just barely a month later, 6 miles down the road here in Farmville, when Barbara Jones and her classmates led a walkout of 400 students protesting the abysmal conditions at the Rocket and Mountain High School. On May 23rd, Albert Hill and Spotswood Robinson filed Davis et al. Versus County School Board of Prince Edward County, calling for an end to segregated schools in Prince Edward County. The case would be bundled with the several other cases that comprise the Brownlee Board cases. And as you know, on March 17, 1954, the court ruled that state-sanctioned segregation of public education violated the 14th Amendment, was unconstitutional. A ruling the next year called for how to implement this ruling, all Lidinsky, and putting it to the federal district courts to work. People would sue for admission and go through this process. It's slow process. Senator Harry Byrd here led the call for massive resistance, which was a coordinated effort to block desegregation in Virginia. And this is a policy pursued throughout the DSACs. So the NAACP parents went to the NAACP, they brought cases, they brought to the courts, and when the district courts began ordering the admission of African American students, the Virginia legislature responded by repealing the state's compulsory school law and making the operation of public schools a local option. In May of 1959, white officials in Prince Edward County quickly established at Prince Edward Academy, a private school for white students supported by grants from the state and county tax credits. No school was available for the 1,700 black school-aged children in the Virginia. Now, I never found any evidence that Robert Kennedy had responded to this or what he was thinking at this point. His first child was born a month after he graduated from law school and moved to Washington, D.C., took a job in the criminal division of the Justice Department, and then then was enlisted by his brother to run a Senate campaign. And he'd never run a campaign before, ran a brilliant campaign. JFK, Senator from Massachusetts, he won at 52. And then Robert Kennedy, this is kind of haunted his his memory. He took a job on the committee chaired by Joe McCarthy, and which we all know, the investigation to communism. And he was there for 6 months. He investigated, allies who were trading with China, and he wasn't up there. He hated Roy Cohen, and Roy Cohen got promoted to head of the staff. Robert Kennedy left. He worked on some other committee for a few months, and then he joined the Democratic minority as their counsel. And Robert Kennedy ended up writing a report that censored Joe McCarthy in 1954. It was 1954, was the Brown decision. So what are people thinking about? All this stuff, right? Into felonies, McCarthy. And then he went on to run the Rackets Committee, which he really became noted for that, investigating organized crime and corruption in labor. And he did that up until his brother announced that he was running the president on January 2nd, 1960. And again, so that's just a few 6 months after the Clinton county's news rose. JFK promised for president. Now, Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy's entry into national politics coincided with major developments in civil rights struggle, and this would impact them and the country. And the books, well, that's somewhere in the same thing. I'm not going to say you look at that. But where, and this was side out there, took out sword, fell off the fire, shuffle. It was of 3 of the people leading the sit-ins, Mary Wright from Spelman College, John Lewis from the Baptist College in Innsbruck, and Diane Nash. But it begins on February 1st, 1960. There had been sit-ins before. South Carolina, where I teach, so people always think this was the first. Well, yeah, maybe. But in Greensboro, 4 students, just 4 freshmen, who worked for an AT, said we've had it, let's go to Woolworths, we're out book study, and sit there from 8. They left, the next day, 100 students staying, the next day, more students came, and then it started happening all across the South. And by, we get the date, you're right, by mid-March, there were thousands of students involved in sit-ins in 48 cities in 11 southern states. So this just spread. This is before any kind of social media, any sort of, that was it. And this really launched a mass movement that would spread into other areas of life and really just culminate with the Civil Rights Act finally from 64. So that's going on. But the Kennedys, so the sit-ins are happening, people know about it, but they're running to win. And their attention is outdoors. Because the migration of African Americans to northern cities by 1960, more than half of them, close to half of them, remember, if you let them in the North, ready to vote, and they've become the balance of power. In 1956, when Adlai Stevenson ran on a Democratic ticket, he did not publicly endorse the federal enforcement of Brown's son. He did not wait any audience. That sent a message to the Democratic Party. And so they were determined. And as they were figuring out ways to appeal to and work with African Americans, they were seeing the musicians rallying quickly. And by the time you get to John Standing winning, they understand so much, and talk about how that's what yields. So what happens? That picture of Bobby Kennedy confronting the campaign, having lunch in West Virginia, major primary win. They craft a platform. Conventions, they have platforms, but we stand for. The Civil Rights Platform was 4 pages long. It was the most expansive, bold platform, saying all the things that they would do. Even the NAACP was shocked. The Black press was shocked. So Endeavor's press was shocked too. But Kennedy had sort of tested the waters, and he realized, and he still said this, when he was a city, platforms mean nothing. We've got the power, we've got seniority, we can slot. So they weren't happy. Byrd, a number of people did not support the ticket, including Byrd and Howard Smith in this state, Strong Thurman, Richard Russell, but the rest thought, let them have their show. We'll take care of it. But as we move to the election, 2 things about Robert Kennedy so it indicates what he's been learning. One involves his response to these 7 Democrats and the hold they have on the legislative process, and the other is that he's seeing conditions that people live under segregation, the human costs. The first, I think, is really interesting. This involves two Southern representatives. In late August, Robert Kennedy's on a late night, midnight talk show, radio show in New York City. So, local show. And Dan Barry, the interviewer, asked him, what is his brother going to do about the coalition of Southern Democrats who defeated key progressive legislation that summer? Federal aid to education, increased minimum wage, and medical care for the elderly. Medicare will come to like 265. But that's sorry. Oh, there they are. They're listening. So much work to learn my California. Diane Nash, Harry Wright, John Davis, we don't have with police. They used to. So when he asked him, Robert Kennedy left. It's midnight, he's in New York. It's New York, with a blunt attack on the two of the most powerful figures in Congress, both from Virginia, Senator Harry Byrd and Congressman Howard Ward Smith. Byrd was chair of the Finance Committee in the Senate, and Smith ran the Rules Committee, very powerful. And he singled out Smith, who, as head of the Rules Committee, often blocked bills from even coming to a vote. He didn't even go to a filibuster agreement. And he said, it is just a deplorable situation that one man could deny Congress the opportunity to vote on legislation, in this case, that would have benefited the entire country. So in this media world, he had no thought that this would filter toward them. But he soon found out that Bush's Evan Smith was deeply, his clothes weren't complicit, right? So he promptly wrote to him, and he said he was sorry. His comments had become a source of personal annoyance to the congressman, because that was certainly not intended. But he went on to say, I have very strong feelings for our own survival and the survival of our children, that this country was to have eternal strength. Regarding federal aid to education, he said he had visited more than 100 high schools and colleges around the country during the campaign and realized how much help was needed in this area. I feel the people acting through their government must assist in this area, and members of Congress have the right to vote one way or the other. These are my convictions, and I have no apologies to make for them. But he concluded, I very much regret having personally offended you and realize that you began your service to this country long before I was born. Smith acknowledged his thoughtfulness in writing, but he said, you failed to refute the widely circulated reports that accused me of deliberately sabotaging legislation. I do not appreciate being put in the role of boogie boy for all the disgruntled elements who are unhappy that the American people have not embraced more readily the ultra-liberal platform adopted in the LA Convention. He advised that such an attack in the post-presidential race, and it wasn't even met, was untimely and not the best way to win friends and influence people. Smith then went on to obtain a transcript of the interview, took out the relevant passages, copied that and the correspondence between him and Kennedy, consented to every verse at their Southern verse on us. JFK was asked about this when he met with some representatives from Florida and South Carolina, and he said, oh, Bobby, he's just young and very hot-headed. Move on. But later that fall, to me, this was really telling. He arrived in Savannah with George Peake, who was again a Southern segregationist who worked for Florida, I think his name, George Smathers. And so they arrive at the airport and they're picked up. And Kennedy says to the driver, is our Ruchka Hotel through the predominantly African-American area, Second City? He said, no. He said, well, that's where I want to go. So at his insistence, they keep some more hands. The troop was re-rallying. And he's looking at how people are living segregated in poor urban areas. It was seeped into all of them. And then they get to the motel. And he says to him, with the Sullivan Hotel, how many Negroes, terminates, are going to be in this student? He said, I told him none. He said, we said, well, then there's no doing. Yeah. So then they go to the hotel and ask if he had an invite. Yes, so bad. So that is a sign. He's seeing, he's starting to fish black at this. The election is very close. I mean, very close. And but then when those northern states, Illinois, New York, states that critical, and then state him. And Robert Kennedy intended that he would just go back. He had 7 children by now, and practice law and do that. No, my father said it. You need to come with me. And And there's an account of a meeting. John Siegenthal, who was a close friend of Bobby Kennedy's, was like just a three of them in the Georgetown house of John Kennedy, December before inauguration. And Siegenthaler remembers the conversation. Trying to tell his brother, I need you to be my attorney general. He said, I need somebody I can trust, someone who tell the unvarnished truth, especially when there were problems. He immediately brought up civil rights, and he looks to Siegenthaler, who's from Tennessee. You're from the South, he said. You know how difficult it's going to be. Then he said to Bobby, I don't want somebody who's going to be faint-hearted. I want somebody who's going to be strong, who will join me in taking whatever risks or whatever downside exposure there was, and who will deal with the problem honestly. We're going to have to change the climate in this country. And if my administration does the things I want to do, I'm going to have someone as Attorney General to carry these things out who I can completely love. So he said, so that's it, General, but let's go. And he went out to his front steps, the press was waiting, and he announced several appointments with his brother. And it's proved to be a remarkable achievement. Robert Kennedy was interviewed, his first interview was with Life magazine. And the first thing he wanted to talk about was civil rights. He asked him, I don't have much experience in this field, therefore it's getting my immediate attention. He admitted his sympathies with the Sands. They were morally right, and integration should happen everywhere immediately. But he also learned that others had grown up with totally different backgrounds and worries, which we can't change overnight. Now, the Justice Department will not tolerate defiance of court orders, but will they try and raise the groundwork that needs to accompany sweeping change. So this is his, so patience, understanding, dialogue, and rule of law, ultimately. But he also observed the hypocrisy of people in the North. He'd been around. He said people in the North, they live their lives and indicate that they would rather talk about integration than live it. In 61, he goes up and he begins to organize programs to pay people with recreation and jobs, and looking at conditions, because the policing issue with people getting arrested, what do people need? He went up and met with several groups, and they have these pilot projects with anticipate the law and robbery community action program. He's very engaged in listening and seeing and talking with young people, and he's very attuned to conditions. But the main challenge is in the South, but that's what makes it flamboyant. Pending the defiance of the law, the growing protests, and the explosive conditions. Kennedy hired Burke Marshall to be his assistant attorney general for civil rights, and the two of them wanted to use everything they had, all the tools at their disposal, to work on school desegregation and on voting rights. And again, they're limited. That's what he needs, Civil Rights Act overwhelming. In 1960, only 6% of black children in the South attended desegregated schools. That's 6 years ago, Brown ruling. And in the Deep South, including this state, it was 0.1 to 1%. And it was a slow process, right? And parents involved in the cases and denied, harassed. In New Orleans in 1960, was 4 young black girls in the midst of first grade, the city riot, white people rioting against those girls. And then the state of Louisiana cut off funding to the city schools in New Orleans. So one of the first things they did is in Marseille, and the superintendent of schools for the state is going to go to jail. They restored this record that. Within Prince Edward was on their radar. President Kennedy sent a message down to the school desegregation conference in Williamsburg in February of 1961, 1 month after he became president. And he said, our public school system must be preserved and improved. He praised parents, students, teachers, administrators, black and white, working to make that happen. Quote, our very survival as a nation depends on this. This is no time for schools to close for any reason, and certainly no time for schools to close in the name of immigration syndromes. And so to Kennedy, Bobby, and Burke, that's a green light. They better go and see what they can do about things in the county. And they first they meet with the governor, Governor Harrison, state officials, they talk, dialogue, right? They're open those schools. Harrison said, the law is being defied. He said, I have no authority on local schools. So Burke Marshall filed a motion in Federal District Court seeking allow the federal government to join the NAACP in the lawsuits. And what this would mean is the party claimed the NAACP didn't do this, Justice Department could do. They could sue the state. They sue the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Comptroller of Virginia, and the Prince Edward School Foundation as defendants. Black students were being denied their equal rights and the 14th Amendment, they argued, with public schools closed to them in their county and open elsewhere throughout the state. Well, this is a platform to be serious. Heinemann Lecture said, see, they're attacking all the other schools in the state. The federal government wants to take over. As they said, they should close all the other schools. They're not going to open this one. They're not going to. On May 8th, the federal district judge, Orrin Lewis of Richmond, denied the federal government's motion to intervene, dooming efforts to get schools opened by default. And that was the hope. He said there's no defiance of court order by state or county. Congress has not authorized the Justice Department to intervene in school desegregation cases. So what the Justice Department did is they started working with the NAACP, helping NAACP continues, and mainly they could, as they pushed this case through. Robert Kennedy would continue to try to find a way as the president, and he described the students who were shut out of school as lost children in the age of transition. They've been caught in a social revolution they would not have been making, has made itself felt most directly on them. Now, on May 6, 2 days before the Prince Edward County case was decided or heard, in Richmond, Kennedy made his first formal public address as Attorney General, and it was at the University of Georgia Law School. And 4 months earlier, Charlotte Hunter and Howard Holmes had entered, desegregated the University of Georgia, and there were riots on campus. They were safe, they stayed, and so he's invited down into this situation. The student who invited him, Jay Cox, who's president of the Law Student Advisory Council, and John Siegenthaler, who was Kennedy's aide, Washington, said, if he comes, he's talking about civil rights. He said, no, that's why I invited him. He said, I know what he did at Virginia when they brought Ralph Lynch there, and I want him to use this platform to challenge the illegal segregation in the South later. 1,500 alumni turned out, crammed into her term. There was one academic term, but totally white audience. The governor said, I have to go to Kentucky Derby. I'm not going to be here. No state officials came. So I just have some points he made. At the break speech, Charlene said it was just absolute silence, icy silence. Usually they'd laugh. So he went through and focused on the main issues. And again, it's an appeal. And he appeals to one away thinking that this is the right thing to do. Surely, but you just think about it, right? People have all this bad here, right? On this generation of America, and the opportunity, falls to growing. And you can see, the Brown ruling required action at the most difficult, delicate, and complex nature found in the heart of such institutions. But he was blunt in noting that as far as he was concerned, the Brown decision was right. They said, but my belief doesn't matter. He acknowledged that many in the audience believed it was wrong. That didn't matter. He said, it's the law. And he responded to the people misrepresenting their ethnic and friendship with County, what they were. He said, I cannot believe that anyone can support a principle which prevents more than 1,000 students from one county from attending public school, especially when the step is taken in to circumvent worship law. And then he talks about the opportunity. The South, perhaps more than any section of this country, has been given the opportunity and the challenge of demonstrating America at its greatest, at its full potential of liberty from the law. At the end, you get a sort of standing. Charlene said, I never used to know. She had an icon on my charter for those who sing those. Now, while he's at Georgia, an interracial group of 13 nominated women left Washington to travel to South, testing a Supreme Court ruling, Boynton versus Virginia, which said you cannot segregate. Normally we said you can't ruling and said no segregating on the buses. This was it, you cannot segregate bus terminals, restaurants, say service undistrict cars. So they said, okay, we're going to ride and test that. And we'll ride and we plan to get to New Orleans on the anniversary of Brown. So Brown was nuts, what it decided. as you see here. And this was Robert Kennedy's baptism because he saw he could not be controlled peace of Sicily. This was coming, and he walked away, and we 7 states he used all the highlight to just stop it. So he used some key of the Bible. It's a fireman Rockville, people bearers their lives, and that's mugshot to the end with that left and Jack. They could talk this down near fire. So he's seeing this happening. They drive into Birmingham. There are people with lead pipes and no peace, right? And they just let the mob, Klan and King's mob, beat these rioters. And they're so beaten up, they decide, okay, traumatized, right? They fly to New Orleans, fly there. People in Nashville, very Nashville, you saw, they said, we can't tolerate this. We can't let violence to be nonviolent, so they sent reinforcements. And so this thing really escalates. He's sitting in Washington, trying to call the governor will take his calls, no protection. These young people, citizens, totally exposed, trying to ride a bus through the South. Supreme Court said that you're right. And it culminates with a meeting in Montgomery where King is. And governor, nothing. So Kennedy sends down 500 federal marshals. And there's a showdown that they're going to burn the church down. People are packed in the church, the mob's outside the church. The marshals come, stand in church. And finally, at 10 o'clock at night, the governor sits in there. So it really put him down. When that was over, Kennedy, who had slept in, he was there 10 days, around the clock. He said to one of his aides about the governor and the police and all of these elected officials who were standing by and letting this happen, possible death of these young people. Those fellows are wolves. Those fellows are wolves. So he knew what he was doing. Next crisis, Mississippi. In 1962, James Meredith is at Fort Nevis. He's in mission. They tell the governor he's coming. We're going to get him on campus. He should cooperate with us. He goes to a football game, Boss Burnett, and the crowd, segregation forever, I'm not going to. So they bring him in, they send the marshals in, and all the police, there's no police protection, just the marshals. They're told not to fire unless it's to protect Meredith's life. They get Meredith into the dorm. Listen, 3,000 people on campus, a lot of them coming outside of Mississippi, or outside, so calling some. We followed a French reporter was shot, and he's taking 40 bears of people on elevated white goods to a truck, and then that guy who wanted my campus is shot in the field. They sent 25,000 troops. They sent 25,000 troops to get this down. And Flood simply times that this was the most serious federal state conflict since the Civil War. So the limits of what they could do. Somebody asked Bobby Kennedy, "What did your brother learn?" The worst. He said he learned to never trust an implement reconstruction. That was old school construction. What is it? The 4 whites out. Go out. Can you speak up, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. So 63 is the culminating year, and we talked about that earlier today. President Kennedy begins it with a speech to Congress about civil rights, sends a message to Congress about civil rights. And in it, they never lost sight of the students in Prince Edward County. In this speech, and again, the schools, this is the 4th year of school closure, and ACP is slowly making its way. Kennedy specifically mentions Prince Edward County and notes that the Justice Department just filed a friend of court brief to go along with the NAACP case approaching the Supreme Court. And he observed this bitter effort to thwart a court decree requiring desegregation that has caused more than 1,500 out of 1,800, with some students, as came on today, went to other places, but 1,500 without school in the 3 years. He pledged that the executive branch would do everything to fulfill the constitutional objective of equal, non-segregated education opportunity for all children, and observed that despite these efforts, progress towards primary and secondary school desegregation has been too slow, often painfully slow. Those children are suffering a loss that can never be fully healed. And then privately, he says to Burke Marshall, find a way that the federal government can help the children in Prince Edward County, quote, so long as it is remotely legal. So you got the Burke Marshall, that's what I need to hear. But again, what happens in civil rights history, we get all these things are happening. A showdown is looming in the spring. Students are already admitted to the University of Alabama. George Wallace is governor. He's really the standard bearer for segregation, defying the federal government. So that's coming up again. Bobby Kennedy goes down to Montgomery to meet Wallace, who'd never met him, and to tell him, this is going to happen, and to try to get a read on him. And after 90 minutes, he had no idea. But they let him know that he would go to jail if he. So, but they don't know what's going to happen. But that's coming up. And then he built to South Carolina. He goes to South Carolina on that trip. And I guess the point I want to make, and I'll come back to, he never missed an opportunity to talk to students and to try to just, we were there thinking, and he went to a law school in Carolina, and told them about voting rights and how they should orient their lives in the next 4 years. Clemson had just been desegregated previously. But the spring of 63, May is occurring here, happens. And you've all heard about that. And this is televised. I mean, this just raw, police letting loose with dogs and fire hoses. And just out of control. And again, the administration gets in there, works with King, works with city people to try to get some kind of and the freeway is about desegregating downtown to August. This is a response. But it's national news, protests break out across the country, cities across the country. Some of them verging on people have had it. And what they realized, this is our time for civil rights legislation. This is it. So this is early May. By mid-May, Robert Kennedy, they write legislation. They get the best minds in the department to write really strong civil rights legislation. And they begin building a bipartisan, someone mentioned earlier, I think it was you, Ed, President Johnson, but no, the Kennedys built, they got the Republicans, they lined up because they had to be able to get to a Southern closure. So they worked with leadership in the Republican Party, and they're building together, building a bill that they'll support, that Democrats will support, that will be strong. And so that work is happening in the summer. President Kennedy gives his famous speech, which everyone should read. Again, looking at the national scope, how to the nation to fulfill promises, frustration burning in every city, north and south, where legal remedies are not at hand. During that summer, and then he introduces the Civil Rights Bill. And this speech, if you read it, he and Robert Kennedy wrote it a half hour before he gave it. Wallace had stepped aside, they had desegregated Alabama. He said, I'm going to give the speech tonight. And they did a brains up, and they knew it. I mean, they knew exactly what had to happen and how it talks to the country. So this is 63. Hearings that summer on the Civil Rights Bill, violent clashes in Danville and Cambridge, here in Farmville, protests, and that's when they push ahead with this plan on schools. So early in June, again, they're thinking about that, do whatever you can that's remotely legal or possible. And someone mentioned to Bobby Kennedy about, what about a free public speech system? William Bambitt before. And he says, let's see what we can do. So with the active intervention of Robert Kennedy, they just come down here. William Van Google comes down. They talk to the people here. They talk to Hope Darden. They talk to NAACP leadership. They talk to the governor, who's by this time even realized that he needs to deal with this. And he appoints a board of free black and free white educators, chaired by Coley Dunn, for the president when he was at Virginia. And they begin leasing school buildings to set up, raising money, leasing buildings, getting ready to set up this free public school system. The governor announces the formation on August 14th of the Prince Edward Free School Association to educate children of Prince Edward County without regard to race, creed, or color. Have to raise $1 million fast. They do that with the aid of Robert Kennedy, refurbish the schools. And again, the March on Washington happens August 43rd, so this is all happening that summer. Hire 100 teachers, reach out to the Peace Corps, to the National Education Foundation. There's working overtime. And by September 16th, they're ready to open these schools for the children of Prince Edward County. For the first time in 40 years, black children are attending school again. It was more white students that make it. It's open to everyone. 100 teachers from across the country, more than half of the teachers in Virginia, 40 of them white, fully integrated faculty the first time in the state of Virginia. So this happens across that span of months. And as we got to earlier, the day before the school opened, the church was bombed to Birmingham in response to the protests, and 4 non-girls were killed in that bombing. So, I mean, the intensity of this time, dark history, and Prince Edward was sort of coming through in this moment, right? But that happened. And so people made, very tense, very explosive. That fall, they're working on the Civil Rights Bill. A lot of challenges, keeping this coalition together, keeping liberal Democrats from throwing everything in that'll get the bill filibustered and Republicans walking away. They get this bill, and in writing about this, researching this, I was just so struck by the talent of John Kennedy and his brother, JFK, the way he got these Republicans to stay with him. And one of them said, he looked at me, right, it still has Charlie, but he said, President Kennedy looked at me and said, Charlie, do it for your country. And communicating the realization that this is about, how can you, see, this is the party scheme. Everything's partisan, but some things are above that, and you come together. And they assure the Republic, we'll give you credit. We're glad to share credit. We need to get this done. And what's ironic is that November 20th, the day that Robert Kennedy celebrated his 38th birthday, the House Judiciary Committee, which was the key one, that voted the bill out, intact, ready to go. And that would be the bill that ultimately Lyndon Johnson would sign. A coalition, all together. That's November 20th. 2 days later, November 20th, the president leaves for Dallas, and 2 days later, he's gone. And that, so all of this has come together, and he's gone. And the impact of his brother's death to Robert Kennedy is literally impossible to describe. Someone said, John Siegenthaler said, it communicated itself as physical. Ethel Kennedy said it's like she lost his arm. I mean, they were close. They had this whole thing built, this inspiration, this orientation in our countries, and he was gone. So what does Robert Kennedy do? Well, he's carried, the Justice Department, Lyndon Johnson said, this is yours. You can't, they built a team and worked with this. It's an amazing operation. So he kept working on that, and he finally comes out again in the spring to move around the country and talk, and that's when he ends up coming here. But one thing he says, he goes to a conference in April, and about the bill, and he said, it's critically important that the bill pass because it demonstrates that blacks and whites can work together, that the government's going to do something about this issue. He said that anybody who thinks this bill is going to solve the problem of disability is out like it is armed. And he's thinking about northern cities where this bill will mean nothing, about poverty, the segregation, the schools, no jobs. But this was essential benchmark for moving forward. And he said there must be action by all citizens, local citizens, political leaders, newspapers, to realize this social transformation. There is a revolution going on in this country, and an opening at this moment of history, an opening where there's a genuine concern, and he found it moving around young people, a concern for social justice, and you had to march for that because there's a tremendous headwind. Opposition was rising, backlash, people thinking George Wallace creating all kind of misinformation about what this bill will do. You'll lose your job. People will get all these things. The primaries of '64. Barry Goldwater opposed the civil rights bill, saying unconstitutional. He's running on that. But George Wallace is running in Democratic primaries. He wins 34% of majority Wisconsin, 30% in Indiana, 40% in Maryland. He's taking this message, anti-civil rights, anti-federal government, and winning votes and really raising alarm among people who don't know what the bill is really about. Kennedy is looking to young people. And I think, he was impacted like so many people then. I think people like Barbara Jones, like the Freedom Riders, like the people of SNP. And again, black and white really, pushing this thing, creating this movement, and having this sort of deep civic commitment. And his expectations for college students were high. He said they had the advantage, they had the access to education, and it was their responsibility to participate in public life and help meet the needs and challenges at that moment. So when he goes back on the road in '64, in the spring of '64, he is interested in really talking to college students. He goes to Marquette University, stick with them, tells them there never was a time in history where the need for active involvement of young people was stronger, and the opportunity for them to do something of significance has been greater. And this is the context of his visit to Hampden-Sydney. He comes to Prince Edward as a fulfillment of what he and his brother had done. And one thing I want to mention, I was thinking about this when I talked to Lara about this, not wanting him at Longwood. The president didn't want him at Longwood. Longwood's a public school. Robert Kennedy's radioactive himself. His approval ratings were 28% in 1963. He was the bomb guy. John Kennedy's a little better. So he and Ethel helicoptered into Farmville on that morning of May 13th, yes, and began their day visiting each of the 4 schools. And 1,574 students enrolled. In Mary Branch School, 70-year-old Sarah Saunders, the paper reported, presented with a bag of 1,800 pennies wrapped in red, white, and blue ribbon for the JFK Library. He spoke briefly of each school, telling the students that President Kennedy had spoken about them frequently and had been deeply concerned about them during the closing of their schools. He was gratified, he said, to see the progress they had made in arithmetic and reading over the past 8 months. And reporters who followed them said it was just a deeply moving moment. You see a picture of it here again. The Longwood president, as was mentioned, made it clear that Robert Kennedy was not welcome at the college. We did not desire a stop by the Attorney General at Longwood. Well, his car drove through the campus, and Ann Lund, who was here earlier, was in the who surrounded him, stopped his car, so he had to stop and give an impromptu speech, and with hundreds of beaming, shrieking women reading it. And then he went to the town center, and he was so gratified that when the car stopped in front of the courthouse, people came out, and they were glad to see him, or talk with him, and welcomed him to Farmville. And I learned on my way here, talking to Lara on the phone, I didn't realize that it was, how did Bobby get here? Hampden-Sydney's college president, H. Taylor Reevely, and his grandson is currently the president of Longwood, invited Robert Kennedy to come speak to students, which he was always eager to do. And what happened that day, and we heard a little bit from Ed earlier, and from Ann, the 2 people who were there, he knew he was going to a place where these students then had been raised and from South, certain conditions. I mean, he understood that, right? But he also understood the power of education and reasoning and dialogue, and so he goes in to this, hall, and according to one of the things I read, there's a huge Goldwater sign up, and he said this today, Massachusetts socialism. So that's his greeting. And hostile students, including Louis Greele, began to hiss and rumble as the Attorney General moved to the lectern. So he took out his jacket, he rolled up his sleeve, started his prepared remarks, and said, "I believe you gentlemen have a few questions." And for 45 minutes, he fielded questions about his political future, about the Vietnam War, and about the Civil Rights Bill. And when he asked who opposed the bill, applause filled the hall. When he asked who supported, moderate applause. Who opposed it, just louder. And he said, I don't understand your opposition. Go over to Prince Edward County, as I've just done, and see those children putting their hands on their hearts and swearing allegiance to the American flag and seeing America the Beautiful. And then he went on and said, in one of the quotes that I learned from just various little materials out there, he said, the young people of America, both white and Negro, should become personally involved with the problems facing this country and make an effort to give some and looking to them. In the end, it said that with a combination of grace, courage, candor, and humor, he won over the assembly. Is that true? Ann said it was. Enough. And he had dialogue. He had raised the thoughts. This afternoon they said, we can't remember what he said. But what was it feeling? What was it feeling? And he had been there with them. And he went to several other colleges that spring, and there are bits and pieces of speeches that we reported on. At the University of West Georgia, he went to the dedication of a chapel in name for his brother, Interfaith Chapel. And he talked about intolerance and those preaching it. And he said, they don't rely on persuasion to advance ideas. They raise false fears, seeking to escape reality by the slogan or a scapegoat. When a student asked him how the Civil Rights Bill would affect property rights, it was a big thing that Wallace trumped on, your property. He said, if this bill had what George Wallace said it had, I would be against the bill. What the bill required was that if a place was open for the general public, it was to treat all the public equally. And then he told them the story of a black soldier who fought in Vietnam, was buried in Arlington Cemetery. But his widow, returning to Texas after the burial, did not find a hotel to stay in and had a hard time finding a place to eat. He said, the fact that Alabama, Mississippi, and other southern states would never end segregation voluntarily, he entitled the government to do. In fact, it was imperative in his government to do it. He spoke at the University of Mississippi in 1966, where he just scorned after that episode in 62. And he said, in such a world, a fantastic and dangerous world, we will not find answers in old dogmas by repeating worn-out slogans or fighting on ancient battlegrounds. The struggle has moved on. And one of his amazing trips, again, initiated by students, was to South Africa. He was invited by the National Union of South African Students, a student anti-apartheid group, in 1966. And he said, youth is a state of mind, a temper of will, quality of imagination, of courage over timidity, and appetite for adventure over lack of ease. And he said to them, and he said to young people and all people, especially young people, each one of us can work to change some small forthcoming events. And the total of all of these acts will be written with history of this generation. And that hope comes from that speech. So that's 66. So the next couple of years, again, what he saw was happening, the cities happened. Cities exploded across the country. In the summer of 1967, there were over 150 racial uprisings, rebellions throughout the country. Detroit, New York, huge, beyond odds. Vietnam War escalating, 500,000 soldiers there. What was the response even of President Johnson? Law and order, send the military. So Robert Kennedy decided to run for president. He announced on March 26, 1968, and when he announced his candidacy, he said this: I run because I am convinced that the country is on a perilous course, because I have strong feelings about what must be done. He sought an end to America's war in Vietnam, but more than that, he joined the broader fight over policies that have long been challenging. And he discussed what was happening in Los Angeles, Mississippi, Appalachia, Native American communities. He talked about young people he had listened to and their anger about the war they're sent to fight and the world they're about to inherit. His first stop as a presidential candidate was at the University of Kansas. Then he went to Kansas State. Then he went to the University of Alabama, University of Georgia, and then Vanderbilt. And, this is the scientific batch of the bread. And Louisville was the source for much of what I know about what happened that day, and that is President Wrigley standing behind the warfare. So there he is speaking at the University of Alabama, and that's James Hood, who was one of the students he integrated at the University of Alabama in 1963. When he raised a family building. So he, and he, again, similar themes at Alabama, free talk and free dissent are the basis of politics of challenge and change and to creating a national consensus. He said, this election will mean nothing if it leaves us after it is all over, as divided as we were when it began. And then I think this statement is so relevant to today. Those seeking higher office must go before all Americans, not just those who agree with them, but also those who disagree, recognizing that it is not just our supporters, not just those who vote for us, but all Americans who must lead in the difficult years ahead. There will be many issues we disagree on, and we can confront them with candor and truth. No need to paper over differences on specific issues. And he showed that he campaigned at the University of Indiana Medical School, and he talked about his plans for expanding public, federally funded health clinics in poor neighborhoods and various things like that. And it's a pretty hostile organization there. There's some bruises and bow-water signs. And so they started to argue with him. They wanted to say, okay, so where are you going to get all that money to put these federal programs? And he goes, from you. And then he said, I don't like the tone here. And he said, and look around, all you white medical students here. Well, you have African Americans fighting your war in Vietnam, And so one student said, some of us agree with you, And he left there and he said, well, no wonder none of our doctors were carrying the community in Indiana. But he didn't, that was an opportunity. He took them on, right? And just went back and forth with them. I'm coming close to the end, but I think one thing he said in one of his last speeches, again, speaks to today. He was campaigning in Indiana when Dr. King was assassinated. And he was on his way to Indianapolis to give a speech. The mayor said, don't go. There's been, expected trouble, violence, riots, because the speech was organized by John Lewis, who became a volunteer, who worked in his campaign. And they organized this meeting in the evening over in an African American section in Indianapolis. And then the police chief said, don't go. He said, look, I and my wife and children could go to that neighborhood, lie down in the street and fall asleep and be safe, which you can't at your home. He said, I'm going and I don't want any case to be made. And so he went, and you can listen to the speech you can see it on YouTube, just Google it. He got there. The people, most of them had heard their teens and killed, which were the fastest people out here, and no cell phones. And so he told them. And we said, I'm going to talk to you for a little while. We told them, this is Dallas Luis's word, just two things. He said, when he broke the news to the crowd, it moved through them like a wave. He recalled he had no notes. He spoke simply and honestly, completely extemporaneously, and the crowd hung on every word. And he began by saying, Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and justice, between fellow human beings, and died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it is perhaps well to ask what kind of nation we are and what direction we want to move in. And it's on operating minutes. So 2 months later, he won the primary in California, which made him the likely Democratic nominee before he gets killed by an assassin's sword. Just shot just minutes later in Washington State. So I want to end with a little quote about Bobby Kennedy that I think captures that spirit that I think is reflected in how he tried to really work with our country and everybody to sort of embrace the opportunity created by the civil rights movement, by the protests, by the focusing our attention on all the legacies of our history and make a commitment to deal with them. And so reflecting on the loss, Dennis Baldwin, who we had, I think was sort of running with in 1963, I opened the book with that. But Baldwin, in 1970, said about Bobby Kennedy, he was somebody in the 20th century with enough passion and energy and patience. And of him and his brother, Baldwin recalled, they both had minds that could be reached. He explained, there's some connection, there's dialogue, there's something happening that makes things possible. Thank you. I love question.
I think we have time for a couple of questions, if anyone has one for Dr. Sullivan.
Testimony.
Even best. Let's do. Yeah. I'd like to offer something that hadn't been mentioned that it's not that terribly important. I was a student in the academy in 1964, and we were told that there would be no extreme that day. They'd be really mad, not because I could go, but I was told I couldn't. And I just thought I'd pass that out there. So I thought it was important things to recognize, to attend.
At what, at the academy?
Of course, that's okay.
Practical. Interesting. Living. It's yeah.
So, well, but we were told about it that time. It's a little side note.
No, it's a good side note. That's really interesting. And I told you that.
I was there.
That's 210. To see
Bob
Bob
Kidd, the headmaster, so we were
not
not
expected
to go.
We would get no excuse to absence. I wouldn't have had a way to get there. I was just pissed off.
I was so glad that was I was not.
Sorry.
Other questions or comments, memories?
Spate. So it's so weird. It's Johnson fit in all of this. I mean, I have a sense that he seemed to be a little ahead of Kennedy's, or maybe in front of them, not so.
No, it took me 10 years to realize that. No, Lyndon, and I just mentioned his response to Fairey, you know, he did, this is a law and order issue, not the war of poverty. I mean, Martin Luther King said, I'm the doctor, the war of poverty is barely a skirmish, 1966. So there is a mythology around President Johnson that, and it's not like a game down, you know, it's who's, you know, who's responding. And I think what's into, I mean, they're not looking at his face, you know, I mean, it's, and I'm not saying Johnson was either, but I think that when you see like Prince Edward County, just the attention, you're dealing with Cuba, they did, you know, the thing, when the freedom rides happened, he was going to meet with just the president. And they're like, oh my God, this is all over the place. Bert Morrison described going to meet with President Kennedy, because they were going to do certain things, they weren't going to let him know. He was in his pajamas, right? And they sat around, he didn't complain. Oh my God, why is this stuff? What are we going to do? You know, there was not that, there's a certain confidence about that, right? But there was such an understanding of what this meant for their country. And just what, you know, the protests in the South to put it all out there. But then he, you know, when I learned about Robert Kennedy, probably, as he'd been to these cities in the North, conditions were intolerable. And the first explosion was in Harlan. It happened 10 days after they signed the Civil Rights Act, because the police officer shot and killed a 15-year-old boy, James Powell. And, you know, and that was part of the cause. But it's a reaction to that, and then to this just awful conditions, right? And knowing that the Civil Rights Act is not going to change that. This is not serious issue mandated by law. And so, you know, it's a whole list of things, not who signed the bill. But as he said in 64, if you think that's going to solve it, you're nuts. But we have to have it. You know, we have to have it. So I think Lyndon Johnson has maybe done a great job, but the historians have been lazy, including me, that we've never really questioned that or thought about what is the role of presidential leadership, right? And so I interviewed John Doerr for my book on the NACP, and I was of the opinion, he said to me, you know, and John Doerr was way up there in the Justice Department. He worked with Moses in Mississippi. He's just right in the middle of everything. Go to where it's actually. And he said, you know, he said the civil rights award, that's a Kennedy thing. No, I didn't go teach you that. It was on my thing, but he was right. And it wasn't a, it was a, you know, they built this bipartisan thing. They built it. And so they set up the strategy. You had to have that, and they bumped the filibuster. They were able to break the filibuster. And so when Johnson signed it, and Johnson was so worried about them getting credit, and Richard, we get sort of But again, if you do civil rights history, if you do African Americans, if you follow like protest and how the people respond to it, then you really see what happens. But to me, the thing is that people neglect the cities and Johnson's response. There's a book called From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime. That's about Johnson's. I think it exaggerates some stuff, but I think basically it's true. And then you understand why he would decide to be that way. But again, he comes to a certain tradition in this country about policing and about cities. When the servants, the uprising in Watts in '65, which was huge, you know what Johnson's response was? How did they do this to me? After all I've done for them, you know what Robert Kennedy's response was? Somebody said law and order. He goes, how can you ask black people in Bedford-Stuyvesant and Harlem to obey the law when the law is the enemy? The law is always used against them. Robert Kennedy said that in 1965. He understood that. It wasn't like a proclamation. He was describing. And so how he responded to this, pushing for more, just dealing with the, at hearings in 1960s. Ralph Ellison testified, King, all kinds of people, and urbanists to really spotlight these deep problems in these cities and how you didn't need just a program, you needed a holistic approach. And he helped develop the Brooklyn Bedford Society that did that. So yeah, I mean, I hope, I love Brian Medler, but I hope people will start to consult it and just sort of open up their minds. And in the meantime, Johnson is, this war in Vietnam. And Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, when he, 68, he admitted that his brother, they made, there's a bomb, the day Neverson, round troops, bombing, get back to that. So I'm glad you asked that, though, because I think it's misinformation.
Does Carol agree with you where Johnson for the suit?
Probably not, but Carol doesn't know about history. I mean, I've read some of the stuff. Johnson went and visited these communities. Going and visiting, I mean, Carol's a great writer, great.
He certainly does his research.
I'll read about it. Whether he agrees with me is not a question. Does he agree with me discoverable? I mean, I think that's, I'm not an advocate of his wording on his book, but ever. And I think he has an approach that says, I'm trained in African American history. I come to American history in a way that Reagan is that far out. And I think that, so I don't know whether he was or not, and that's how we had the first thing. But it really am similar interpretation. I don't think he'll look at the same. I mean, he's done a job of showcasing. This isn't about.
Well, I think you write the politics violence game.
Oh no, that's written. I mean, no, that Johnson. If you look at people, Mike Manscliffe stopped me and said that. The Senate all disagrees. No, he's important. He supported the bill.
But anyone else have managed to do it at that point?
He couldn't have done it without the back. He couldn't have done it. He supported the bill. He, certainly, but the work of getting this coalition lined up and working it, it's again not the credit that he supported. It was not just his bill. That is incorrect. Right? It's incorrect. It's he's important to it. It is the work that they did to the Justice Department is and it would be interesting to see if this is a mistake. And Robert Kennedy said it made sense because nobody thought that bill would pass.
Yeah.
Nobody thought. And he said, if it doesn't, he's the president. He doesn't need to get the $3. He got it. That was like always managed. And they had the people. I mean, they had built up this team over 3 years. They wrote the act. They wrote it. They lobbied. They got it through the Judiciary Committee. So how he determined the kind of role concentration relationship that other people truly were taught. But I think this, for me, the research on this part of the history was fascinating. I have a whole chapter on it, and he's fun.
Well, I don't know about you all. This makes me want to go to the historical record as quickly as possible. Johnson did certainly want to take credit.
If you go back to the picture at the schools with the strike installation, it's one of the first pictures. Those are tar paper shacks.
Yeah.
That's where the students went to school at the Moton School out back. Those
School
were,
bus went by there every day, and I wondered why black people didn't have good schools. What was wrong? I was just a kid.
those were tar paper buildings out back.
For the students who know where Moton is, there's now, and I know we have some of our Moton friends and leaders here, but one of those structures has been reconstructed alongside Main Street. So
Looks a lot better than those days.
well, it doesn't look exactly like it did then, but there is interpretation inside the museum too. So again, for the students who haven't been there, I strongly urge you to go. And I also urge you all who want to read more, you know, we are in an election year. It's not going to be an easy election year. And what a wonderful way to think about what a life of service looks like and what it means to be. So I thank you for giving us.
Well, and there's one last thing along that line is that, you know, elections are important, voting is enormously important. I think that's not, you know, that's not it. It's it every day. I mean, Liz appeals to men, even in these difficult times, that it's, it's just making it part of your life. The community and to try to get out of the polarized, you know, to find ways to build misery. but I think his point running too is just that it's what he was saying in all situations and what they acquiesce.
Democracy is not just an election day activity.
It's an everyday.
It's an everyday activity.
Yeah.
I want to thank our panelists from this afternoon. That was wonderful. I want to thank Dr. Sullivan. If you all would like to purchase the book and read more about Bobby Kennedy, it looks like we have some copies over there, and she will be signing for you. And I urge you to carefully take a selfie, if you wish, with John Kennedy, who is over here awaiting your inspection. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. Thank you very much.